I'm going to ease in to, this is it. Look at it. Fucking look at it. I was staring at this catatonically a few weeks ago, just trying to process what this was. You can see CourierNew. If anyone... Maybe this will make it click. This is CourierNew's first work. If you were in the early Undertale fandom and you were one of these 241,000 people, you probably know CourierNew, one of the early original canonical Save the Goat post-pacifist retcon fics. The fic which, like, the one piece of media which got me into fan, works in general. Like, this basically broke the dam for me engaging in fan fiction, because before that I thought it was like weird and gross and I would never do it. So shoutouts to this. $5 from Momo. Oh, thank you, Momo. I used to be indifferent to Azzypants, but I'm like a slowly growing black mold infestation. I've grown concerningly okay with it. Cheers, let's go. That's too real, Momo. That's too real. Thank you, though. Yep, I got the bingo card, don't worry. It is on standby, apparently freshly updated by Pidge. It's beautiful. Is that Sona? Was she up there before? Oh yeah, another piece of crazy news, unrelated to Azzypants, but the creator of Kissy Cutie, the other notorious fanfiction within my community, they joined my server a few days ago, and there was like an immediate impromptu Q&A thread made. I've never seen a more active thread in the server. Like, they were more popular than I've ever been within my own community. It was nuts. And yeah, they were just like answering people's questions for like over an hour, I think. And they actually made this piece of art, which, let me find that real quick. It was really nice. A lot of insight into how Kissy Cutie got made. Luckily, they don't appear to bear me or Toffee any grudge for kind of like roasting their game a lot on stream, because they acknowledge that it was like a really kind of down and dirty amateur effort with like it was barely holding itself together through the production. But look at that. That was made by the creator of Kissy Cutie. That's a Sona. It's lovely. I was very happy to see that. But I'm glad that's come full circle, and like the author of the game doesn't have to remain as this like mysterious entity who may or may not be pissed off at us for exposing their game to a wider audience. It's nice to know that's not the case. But yeah, it sounded like during the production it was like they were arguing with the artist constantly about different takes and headcanons, and people were leaving the project or refusing to do things, and I was like, ah, yes. Yes, it's a fan game. It reminds me of my own dog shit terrible experience working on fan game. I guess they're all just like that. They're all just complete organized chaos, and this one actually managed to hold it together enough to make a product, which is amazing, honestly. Okay, so I've procrastinated enough. What channel's the Q&A in? I think it was called Kissy Cutie Questions. I think it's in the same, it's in a thread in the same channel that the Kissy Cutie main thread is stored in. I'm sure someone could direct you to it if you asked in the server. Alright. Here it is, Scatterplot. The newest Courier fic. The first Courier Deltarune fic in like over a year, I think. This is an Undertale Yellow fic. It's very good, actually. Another Undertale Yellow fic. Courier Undertale Yellow is significantly better written than Undertale Yellow, unsurprisingly. For all the merits that game has, the story wasn't the most coherent. Where is it? This is the last Courier Deltarune fic. It's a Caddy and Chris summon Gaster in the basement thing, which was surprising, but it's from 2022, so like almost 2 years ago. That's crazy. We revived it. Alright, I guess I'm gonna dive in. This is on the longer side, but it's not crazy long. It's kind of like on the longer side of CourierNew one-shot territory. And I don't mean one-shot the game, I mean the kind of like like a short vignette style fic, as opposed to the big ones. Summary. As summer draws to a close, Asriel invites Pizzapants to walk some familiar paths in hometown's woods. The two of them stay out later than they should. Special thanks to ACDS. I wonder what that is. Notes. The only me is me. Are you sure the only you is you? From Playable Teaser. Interesting. Usually you get a song quote at the start of a courier fic. I got to like share on my lore now. I'm like a courierologist. Usually, back in the day, the title was a song, was a reference to a song, and then you'd get a quote from another song as the note. But this appears to be a quote from a game, and as far as I know, this is not a song. So I guess it's like in later JoJo when Araki stops making the stands tarot card themed, just kind of gives up. Maybe it's like that. There I am, Gary, there I am! There you are. Every day here was much like the one before. Flour in every crevice, dough gumming up his fingernails, the acrid stink of the oven, and its blistering heat at his back. The tooth-rattling clamor of the soda/soft-serve machine underscored by the crummy box fan that ran 24/7 to feebly push away the heat. The warrior would pound pizza dough with such fervor that he felt it through the soles of his shoes, a tectonic heartbeat that followed him home. The fluorescent's wasp-like buzz overruled even the pizzeria's usual dim, and they were always much too bright. Tooth, says Pidge. Tooth. You're gonna call it the orbs like the GDQ audience? Pizzapants, dubbed such by tragic circumstance against his will, scurried away from this whenever he could, to the bathrooms or around back with the dumpsters for a quick smoke break, or just a chance to stare blankly into space until his tinnitus abated. The rest of the time, he was usually stuck on register duty and felt a pang of dread with each new silhouette that drifted past the pizzeria's greasy glass facade, because hometown was small enough for every customer to be a repeat customer, and each one brought a fresh brand of torture. Today had been especially bad, and when the front door chimed at 4:45, he was tempted to storm out of the place right there, but then Asriel had sauntered through, in all his gangly glory, and pulled up a chair nearest the exit. He gave Pizzapants a meaningful look, smiled, and watched the wall, pointedly not ordering anything. Those last 15 minutes flew by exceptionally fast. Gangly Asriel. Damn, the prose is great. No shit. You thought I was just I was just into this guy for no reason, eh? Very prose. Yeah, we do not have the Bara Asriel. We have a gangly, lanky dude. I think so. It's kind of in line with some like earlier lore from some Courier fics years ago. The early Courier Deltarune fics were weird. They were like post chapter 1, before chapter 2 was a thing, and so they were really speculative. There wasn't really much to go on at that point, so you just had to guess. You just sort of picked a theme you saw and ran with it. So we have stuff about Asriel being an avid photographer in the Courierverse. And like hometown being corrupted by like pervasive shadows and like all the Gastery influence. It gets very Lynchian in Courier's take on Deltarune usually. And Chris is this sort of like, he's like, they're literally fading into the background. They're becoming so like unnoticeable, and like it's like a metaphor for all sorts of mental stuff probably too. It's complex, and I'm doing a bad job at paraphrasing it, but there's like a lot of shit going on in the background here that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg through the medium of this Azzypants story. He wrapped up, clocked out, and severed himself from the front counter, then walked up to the table. Asriel glanced at him like he just noticed he was there. Fuck, which one is talking here? I gotta parse this quick. Howdy means Asriel, right? Howdy, he said. Come here often. Funny guy. You show up just to practice your one-liners. Is that the burger?
Maybe I should go with the more Brooklyn kind of thing for this one. A more let that sink in vibe. I don't know. Yeah, funny guy. You show up just to practice your one-liners.
I was actually planning to stop by the lake. What took him with?
Like this?
He asked.
I look like they scraped me out of the oven.
You look fine, Pete. Asriel stood up. And up. Half a head taller than him, even if he didn't count the horns. Up to you, obviously. I'll wait outside. At least we can split halfway if you'd prefer to go home. And with that, he left, Pizza Pants rolling his eyes at his back. Asriel Dreamer turned agreeability into a martial art. Pete, I know. I'm gonna have to work back into the Brooklyn Pizza Pants. It was always on the knife edge of working or not. I like how there's not just a Pizza Pants voice, there's like 3 of them, and I just choose one from like my little array of Pizza Pants voices depending on how the wind's blowing that day. He's Peter Zachary Pant. I like how like he's fallen right into the meme of like very detailed explanations of where Pizza Pants got the nickname from. That's such an Azzypants trope. I'm glad to see it represented here. He'd always been the golden boy of hometown, effortlessly avoiding the myriad social pitfalls that opened up beneath lesser people's feet. In grade school, he was a straight-A student whom all the adults doted on and all the kids befriended, despite showing off the kind of bright-eyed preciousness that would turn a normal child into martyr, that would turn normal children into martyrs of bullying. And then his growth spurt had come and hit him like a train. Unlike his parents, Asriel was skinny as a beanpole, and when he was talking to people, he'd often lean to the side as though blown by a strong wind. His sense of coordination only manifested when he was running track, and yet everywhere else, that skewed lankiness somehow enhanced his charm. Quick-witted, good-humored, endlessly patient. It was like he'd been born into some magical nexus point of popularity. It was completely unfair. Or at least that's what Pizza Pants had believed until recently. They fell in line beside each other on the sidewalk. The streets were quiet. Most people headed in for supper around this time, and aside from their footsteps, there was only the occasional distant car engine or birdsong trill. A sunny day. The late afternoon light helpfully pointed out the sauce stains and flour marks on his clothes. Asriel usually favored button-ups in various shades of purple, and today he had on a plaid short-sleeve number that barely showed a wrinkle. Confirmed flannel shirt wearer. I think it was very specifically a plot point in 1 by 1 that Asgore became a fiend for flannel shirts after escaping to the surface in Undertale. I enjoyed that. He's yeeking a little bit. Long yeek type Asriel. It says he's the most charming guy in town. I don't see how that's yeek-like.
What the hell is going on here?
Yeah, he's not wearing green. I think there's at some dusty corner of the canon, there's like a purple Oriel Mumu styled windbreaker jacket that Chris inherits or something that used to be Asriel's, but they fell in line beside each other on the sidewalk. Oh, I read that. What was it like in the trenches today? He asked.
Caddy's family showed up.
Uh-oh.
Ukulele included.
Oh boy.
They went through 3 pies before slowing down.
The memory of it made him want to go for the cigarettes.
They were sitting at your table, actually.
I'd wondered where those claw marks came from.
Her sister wasn't enjoying it any more than I was. Had earbuds in the whole time, and that godforsaken soda machine broke again. Blue Ears was elbow deep in it most of the afternoon. He's the only one who knows how to fix it, but I don't know, he seems weirdly, intimate with that thing.
Sorry, Pete. Better you than him, right? Better him than you, I mean. Haha. I think when I first read this actually made me laugh pretty loud. getting intimate with the soda machine. The fucking mental image is too strong. Hey, Outson, we're reading the Courier fic. It's happening. We just started. I stalled for quite a long time.
Better him than Burly McMuscles, at least. One time he took a crack at it when Undine was around and she decided to pitch in. I scrambled out of there so I couldn't get caught in the blast radius. Next day the place was still standing, but there was some real suspicious dents all around the walls. I talked to management if I gave a crap.
They had reached the intersection. As they turned the corner, Asriel silently looped an arm around him and pulled him close. He rested his cheek against that bony shoulder. This threw me for a fucking loop when I read this for the first time. Because it's ambiguous, and you don't expect it. Most of these fics start with, like, establishing their relationship, but this is like, oh shit. It's just like, they're already a couple, deal with it. I love it. It had started with the nickname. He was actually named for his great uncle Ren. It took me so fucking long to get this. It's like an embarrassing long time to get what this was getting at, but hardly a prize winner to start with. But his nightmare carousel of a job had branded him Pizza Pants after a particularly momentous incident. This incident was better left unrecalled, though that didn't stop the flashbacks. It hadn't been a whole pizza so much as discorporate ingredients. Parmesan scattered like shrapnel, tomato sauce halfway up to the ceiling. A red pepper flake had gotten trapped beneath his eyelid. The eponymous plants needed to go into the dumpster, lest their garlic... the eponymous pants had needed to go into a dumpster, lest their garlic stink contaminate his wardrobe and most of the surrounding block. The nickname had started 2 days later, and he'd accepted it with dull resignation. Small towns had long memories, and a memory that traumatic left an impact crater. He'd entered a world where he was Pizza Pants now. It was the only world. What's it getting at? Ren as in the one with Stimpy. That one. Ooh, says chat. Yeah. It's genius. I'm gonna steal that from my Inuyasha fic. I hope you mean someone's name being Ren. Because that's really funny. Trying to go back to his original name would have merely been a sign of denial, but Asriel, who hung out with him mainly because he hung out with everybody, had one day casually referred to him as Pete, and it had passed without comment, even with that gossipy reptile Braddy in earshot. A nickname within a nickname, a brilliant feint. And though Asriel was the only one who used it consistently, it gave him some respite. I don't know how to pronounce that word. He'd started seeking him out more often after that, and engaged in his favorite activity, which was whining about his job. In his more honest moments, he recognized how abrasive he could be. Most of the town's other residents were fairly affable, no one more so than Asriel himself, but trying to put a smiley face on his day made Pizza Pants' face feel like it was cracking. For the most part, his grousing went in one ear and out the other, but Asriel had listened, well beyond any reasonable extent, even for someone like him, and gradually he'd come to realize that the Golden Boy genuinely enjoyed hearing him talk. The big mystery was why. They had reached Asgore's flower shop. Asriel broke away from him and frowned at the closed sign at the entrance, peered through the windows. The petals formed a muted rainbow through that pollen-caked glass. Ooh, that's a solid line. Love that one. It's another courier trope. I'm going to call those out. It's like motes of pollen floating around places and being visible. Lots of pollen and dust. Loves that shit. Smelling like sweet lemons up in here.
Want to hang around?
Pizza Pants asked. Nah, he's probably back at the hospital. Let's go. The truth, Pizza Pants had decided, was that Asriel listened to him because he wanted the distraction. After all, he had problems of his own, much as the community at large wanted to ignore them. And those problems had a clear origin point, which was soon going to become much clearer. Chris Dreamer, his beloved little sibling and hometown's resident cryptid. The Dreamer and Holiday families had been the two poles on hometown's compass, the points around which everything else had revolved. And they'd been close-knit, even when the Dreamers' newest edition had broken out of their shell and made a pastime of benignly terrorizing everyone else in town, and the Holiday kids in particular. Chris had still been generally liked, in their off-kilter way, and their obvious attachment to Asriel had been endearing, no matter how much they traumatized people. But then one day, out of the blue, Des Holiday had ambushed them with a plastic bat and teed off on Chris hard enough to lay them flat and send a tooth flying, along with a whole swarm of ugly rumors. Only Asriel had been around to see the actual attack, but several kids, Pizzapants included, had gotten a peek at the mottled red stain on the sidewalk before it washed off. It had been their first glimpse of actual blood. The crack of the bat had fractured everything. No one knew its cause aside from the families, none of them were talking. Now Des was gone, Rudy was sick, the Dreamers had split, and Chris's outgoing weirdness had collapsed back in on them. Adolescence had turned them into a shambling narcoleptic that radiated moodiness like a magnetic field, to the point where you almost had trouble focusing on them in the rare occasion they were spotted around town. And here was Asriel, bearing up everyone's hopes and dreams and the weight of his own family in particular, due to leave it all behind. Easy to imagine he'd be a little anxious over what might happen when he finally went to college. Easy to guess he'd take relief where he could get it. Va-va-voom. That's the lore. So, there's actually quite a story behind this interpretation of Des hitting Chris with the bat, which goes back, but I don't want to derail the story completely to talk about that at the moment. It's slightly based on, like in Deltarune, it is known that Des hit Chris with a wiffle bat at some point. It's not really implied to be as violent as it is here, but again, I'll explain. I'm your tour guide here. What is this? Asks chat member. You mean what is Azzypants or what is this fic? You want to know what Azzypants is? It is the ship between Asriel, Dreamer, and Pizzapants in Deltarune, the only true interesting ship in the game. And this is technically viewer-made fanfiction about it. Technically, he is a viewer of my streams once. It had been early spring when the two of them sat side by side at one of these patio tables on the dirt road leading up to the lake. Pizzapants had stubbed out his latest cigarette mid-rant when he'd felt Asriel's hand close over his, and he noticed the way he was looking at him, and all his words dried up. The kiss that followed had been woefully clumsy, and he probably tasted like an ashtray, but Asriel's fangs had pressed against his lips in a way that he hadn't minded at all. Wee-woo, tooth please. I actually asked, I had to ask, if Courier had read Let That Sink In. And apparently he hadn't. This apparently goes back to his Beastars days, writing Beastars fanfic. Lots of fangs in those. Fair enough. Fair enough. There is an appeal. The relationship had never gone further than occasional necking in town's secluded spas, and he didn't expect it to. Nor did he expect it to continue past this summer. Doubtless Asriel would find better prospects than a neurotic aspiring actor who always smelled faintly of garlic powder, but he didn't mind. Under all his lofty hopes for himself, he recognized that life was probably going to continue much like this, a handful of tolerable moments and a sea of grating noise. The lake was empty too, the only movement from sunlight dappling its surface. The shore was pocked with litter from careless visitors. Pizzapants trod a cigarette butt underfoot as he got out his lighter and lit up one of his own. When he and Asriel had started going steady, he'd expected the smoking to be a problem, but surprisingly, Asriel didn't mind it. Like dragon's breath, he'd teased once, and Pizzapants had accepted the compliment without reading into it too closely. Everyone knew about that overdue library book. That's awesome. As an erotic aspiring actor. To Asriel, maybe. Yeah, what is the deal with Asriel's teeth? They're visible over his lips. I've always wondered about that with the Dreamers. It's like, what the fuck are their fangs doing? They're goats with protruding incisors that stick down. I mean canines, not incisors. Burger Pants auditions for Lords of the Locker Room 6. Now that's a mental image. Those are flaps of skin. Who knows? I like the thought that they're fangs even though they're goats. Stream title goes hard? Yeah, they're getting more elaborate over time. The previous one was one with the Dao edition, so I had to top that. The idea of Taoist yaoi is pretty awesome. I guess that was the entirety of Nine Sols, if you ask Pidge, but... Goat Boy got paws? Yeah, he's like some sort of chimeric monstrosity. He's like a goat, cat, dragon thing. Dowie. Don't be talking to me about Dowie. It's Falcor? Yeah, I guess. Goat lions. Yeah, something like that. Where was I? Oh yeah, the overdue library book. He glanced back and saw Asriel had his phone raised.
Again, dude?
It's just reading things in Asriel voice can be unusually difficult sometimes. Just for posterity.
I think you got enough posterity for the rest of the time by now.
Asriel compulsively filmed everything, to the point where a decent chunk of his allowance was earmarked for memory cards to hold all the clips. And most of them were borderline unwatchable, amateur to the point of inducing vertigo in unwitting viewers. Pizza Pants scooped up a rock from the shore and took aim.
Here, let me give you something to really look at.
I'm looking. He let the rock fly and it skipped 4 times. He fist pumped.
Hot damn. Tell me you caught that.
I did. He peeked around the phone. Might have been more focused on you, though. I got your good side.
Man, can you look at, man, you can look at the
Okay, I apologize deeply. Doing all the prose, the narration is, meaning the voices are like going rusty in between.
Man, you can look at that anytime.
He blew smoke and watched the setting sun.
At least for the next, 3 weeks?
Yeah, Asriel pocketed his phone. Getting colder. They went quiet for a bit. Cigarette smoke uncoiled over the water.
You all set to go?
Pizza Pants asked. Barely getting started, really. We'll start to seriously pack up in the next couple of days. Asriel stood up next to him, or stepped up next to him. For now, I'm just bouncing around places. I like to hang out. I don't want to get ready to leave too early, is the thing. It'll be weird if I'm still hanging around the house with all my stuff and luggage.
I getcha. Still, something to look forward to. Finally getting a break from this place.
Sure. I'm a little anxious about it, but... He cleared his throat. That's how it is. Earlier in the year, Pizza Pants wouldn't have tried to cross this next line, but he figured the two of them had gotten close enough to make it acceptable.
How's, Chris handling it?
He asked. Asriel shrugged. There was something helpless in it. I don't see them around much, do you?
What, at the pizzeria? They're smart enough to steer clear of that hellhole. What do you mean, you don't see them around?
Around town, I mean. When I get home, they're usually in bed. We talk at dinner a little, then they go back to sleep.
I can't blame him. Most days I get home so zonked I can barely watch TV without falling over.
He hissed smoke.
Do yourself a favor, Az. Skip straight to being a track star, the president or whatever. Don't bother with the service industry crap.
I'll keep that in mind. The cigarette burned down. The setting sun had almost made it to the tree line. Asriel studied it for a moment, then reached over and patted Pizza Pants on the shoulder. Hey, come with me a sec. He glanced over.
To where? There's nothing around.
Nothing obvious, at least. Asriel walked astride the lakeshore and then jabbed his thumb toward the woods, smiling wryly. Chris and I used to stomp out there pretty often. Want to check it out? His cigarette drooped.
Check what out? The woods, full of wood stuff. Nothing else in there besides that creepy bunker.
There's a couple trails I remember. They're probably all overgrown by now, but we should be able to make them out. It won't take long, I promise. Pizza Pants shonks it. What's your notes in? Thinking going insane with illustrations in PDF formatting? Since your Umers isn't getting read today, you'll work on it. Is it ready yet, Sin? I could read your Umers today. There's nothing to say that I wasn't going to. I didn't... I'm never clear about the state of that, whether it's finished or not is the thing. I haven't really looked at any of the list even, like I've just gone straight to our big main attraction here. it changes the vibe of the scenes. Yeah, when I can enunciate the words properly, but I think it does kind of suit him in a way. They're legitimately very cute in this. Like, I can't even lie. They're very cute. You rewrote half of it, and it's really long. Oh, I see. They're always cute, or they're especially cute? Where was I? He's inviting Pizza Pants into the dark, spooky woods.
Last stop on your nostalgia tour, huh?
Asriel grinned in that irresistible way. You got me. Asriel sighed. Pizza Pants sighed and grinded a cigarette out on the sole of his shoe.
Not like I can get much dirtier. Lead the way, dreamer.
The woods around hometown were underwhelming for the most part. The trees had a certain scraggly quality even when they were in full leaf, and much like the lakeshore, trash glinted amidst the leaves and bramble underfoot, left by the numerous kids who'd gone here in past years. There were no creeks, no landmarks, not much wildlife aside from the birds and little crawly things. And while it was conceivably possible to get lost, you couldn't walk more than 20 or 30 minutes in any direction without hitting a road. Nearly everyone stopped bothering with the place once they got out of middle school. Pizza Pants guessed the woods looked more impressive when they were younger. Most things did. They're not certified night-in-the-woods patriots, getting drunk around bonfires into college. Pidge really likes the Pizza Pants voice. Okay. He stuck close to Asriel, who seemed to know where he was going, and after a little while glanced over his shoulder and saw only more woods behind. Not a whiff of the lake water anymore. When he looked back, Asriel had his phone out again, panning across the tree's dismal canopy. I guess the woods are pretty underwhelming because every tree is the same copy-pasted asset. There's only one tree, dude.
Man, put that thing away, Pizza Pants said. Haven't you ever watched found footage stuff in the woods? The funny guy always dies first.
In that case, you shouldn't have anything to worry about, Asriel quipped.
Never said I did, smartass. You want to get eaten before orientation?
Asriel snickered and trained the camera lens on a tree that was sturdier than the others. One branch looked to have snapped off at some point, its sheared end weathered to ash gray. I recognize this one, he said. Chris climbed it when we were out here together.
They climbed everything, didn't they? I still remember that thing with Caddy's roof.
Chris's acrobatic exploits had in fact ended with Caddy's roof. They'd scaled the nearby tree and made the jump onto her rooftop, and were able to bask in the glory of their achievement for about 2 minutes before realizing they didn't have an easy way back down. The problem had solved itself, in a way. Toriel had been called and rushed over, and the grounding that had followed had been epic, for both of them, because Asriel had been there to film the big moment. 5 pounds, Great British Pounds from Cunningham Fan 1. Thank you very much.
Azzypants, Azzypants, Azzypants. Very enjoyable show. It's enjoyable. Azzypants. I like that one.
Excellent. Courier referencing RAM? What do you mean? The name of his alt account is already a RAM reference. Yeah, this was a few months before the branch broke, see? He pointed to it. I managed to catch them, but they almost squashed me flat. I wasn't as big back then.
No kidding. Though they've been doing their best to keep up.
Pizza Pants squinted at him.
Honestly, the two of you look more like each other these days than either of your parents.
Asriel lowered the camera. I think they'd be really happy to hear you say that. The blue of the sky overhead began to fade. They trudged along for a bit longer and came to a particularly thick trunk, and Asriel turned his heel with military primness and slid down with a yawn and a stretch. Pizza Pants flopped down beside him. God, they're cute. They stayed like that, amidst the birds' liquid trills. We have to get back soon, Asriel said. My mom worries.
Yeah, I know.
Asriel technically didn't have a curfew, but the town was small, and Toriel's eye was all-seeing. This is probably a weird time to ask, but...
This is probably a weird time to ask, but does she know about us?
She hasn't said anything, but I'm pretty sure she does. You're the only one my age who smokes so much. The smell wears off.
Sorry.
Don't be. I like it. Asriel glanced over to him. You want to meet her? Get official approval?
Toriel Dreamer, the all-knowing,
Yeah.
the all-helicoptering.
Introducing BF to Mama. Now that would be it. Has anyone tackled that scenario? I probably has. The awkward family dinner where Asriel introduces Pizza Pants to his mom. That'd be awesome. Where was I? Asriel loves that smoker breath. He's just a freak like that. He loves his weird face and the way he smells bad. That's the appeal.
You're shipping out of here in less than a month, Az. Pretty sure we'd both be better off keeping this on the down low.
I think you're shipping right now, Pizza Pants. He had, in fact, gone through that scenario in his head a few times, only for his imagination to hastily shut down. Toriel had taught grade school in hometown since time immemorial, so she still loomed large in the minds as they got older. The lady was sweet as the pie she consistently baked, but everyone just had to look at her ex-husband to confirm she had a steely side. You really wouldn't have much to worry about, Asriel said brightly. Chris likes you. That counts for a lot.
How the heck can you tell? I barely talked to him.
It's the way they look at people. You learn to pick up on these things if you spend enough time around them. That's how I always knew the way they teased Noelle wasn't anything serious. Yeah, I think in another one of the fics, there's a mention that Chris always looks at you side on if they actually like you, and if you're pissing them off, then they'll just stare at you creepily. It's all consistent. It's all lore. The proceed stare. Yeah, I guess so. The way they teased Noelle. Yeah, but Pizza Pants looked away, staring down at the untidy earth. A lone spider scuttled from leaf to leaf, and he watched it go. A question rose up in his mind, one that had no doubt occurred to nearly everyone in town and had never been asked. And he wasn't sure if it should be asked now. And he wasn't sure if it should be asked now, but there wouldn't be a better moment for it.
Hey, Az, the thing that happened with Des and the bat. If you don't mind telling me, what did Chris do to make her hit them like that?
Oh, I don't know. I don't really think she ever meant anything by it either. Asriel's voice remained light. It was probably good for them, to be honest. Let them know they were crossing a line. He looked up sharply to Asriel's faint, nostalgic smile.
What?
What?
Asriel, she knocked out one of their teeth, didn't she? I mean, I wasn't there, but they were showing it off to people for days.
Asriel blinked, and a number of expressions suddenly passed over his face like bad weather. Puzzlement, surprise, shame. He looked like he'd gone too far out on the tree branch himself, and had just heard the snap of it giving way. Right, he said. Of course. Though, I thought we were talking about something else.
That's my bad. I shouldn't have asked.
And he shouldn't have. He'd never seen Asriel caught flat-footed like that. It made his gut twist. Does anyone else get a bit of... I don't think that's a normal lapse in memory there. I think that's hinting at something. It starts to get lynchy, and now, oh, it super does. Y'all aren't ready for where this fic goes. Like, if this was... you were expecting this to continue on until the end? Oh boy. Oh, hey, Mel. Yeah, I started a bit early. I'm waking up a bit earlier these days, finally. I got to bed as early as 1:30 in the morning yesterday. A gaster particle passed through his brain. That's interesting. I'm going to refrain from, like, I've gotten a bit of authorial commentary on what this fic is kind of about, but I think it would be like a bit of a spoiler to bring that up as I'm reading it. I can talk about that afterward, but I'm just going to let it play itself straight here. And by which I mean play itself extremely gay. You don't have to apologize. He rubbed his forehead, further messing up his cowlick. Oh, he's got a cowlick? That's so cute. Des, she used to bop them with that stupid bat all the time, like a dog with a newspaper, you know? Chris would even start to howl like one when she brought it out. Noma thought it was funny, but then...
We don't have to talk about it.
Sorry, Pete, it's been hard for me to focus on anything lately. Can't think straight.
Join the club, he said. Guess all this college prep's hitting you harder than you thought.
Sure, that must be it. Asriel leaned against him, his horn slightly scraping the tree trunk. I just want to rest my eyes for a second, okay? Then we'll get along. Jostle me if I doze off.
Consider yourself jostled, he said.
And Asriel snorted and closed his eyes. A minute later, his breathing steadied. Pizza Pants felt its rhythmic pressure against his chest. God, they're cute. He took out his lighter and was halfway to reaching for his cigarettes before thinking the better of it. Better to let the guy rest. That moment of confusion had been genuinely alarming. Evidently, he'd been more accurate in his estimation of Asriel than he first thought. There were definitely a few cracks beneath that easygoing exterior. It's interesting how, like, the relationship is characterized here, where, like, they've been together for a while, but, like, Pizza Pants still doesn't really feel like he knows Asriel that well. Like, they've been kind of just, they haven't tried to go too far below the surface, I guess, just because I think they're maybe both thinking about it as like kind of a temporary fling, and they don't really want to get too involved before they have to break it off, maybe. I like that. It feels kind of interesting. A bit more specific of a dynamic, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Been there. Yes, Mel, this is the courier fic. Hey, Roserade, you just finished 1 by 1 on your flight the other day. Hell yeah. All 70,000 words, I think. A hefty boy. Where was I?
It's not like I'm perfect either,
He muttered. The sunlight was still golden, the skies beginning to bruise. A light breeze picked up and made the trees rustle, and that sound lulled him down to sleep. Ruh-roh. Okay, I'm gonna seize this opportunity to go on a quick piss break. I don't usually have to piss so early into streams. Oh well. I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, I'm back. If no one else got me, then Lo-Fi Beats to Stay Determined To by Lewis Plays Guitar got me. Okay. That can go away. The Andrew Pissingham bit has never left. Thanks, Toffee. Umarangi is your personal favorite for the vibes? I almost have no memory of what happens in that one. I remember that it was it's a courier fic, if people haven't heard of it. I think it's Asriel coming back from college in Deltarune, but it's like immediately just goes to this like surreal kind of Lynchian nightmare. There's not really many plot events, I think. It's just kind of a bunch of crazy imagery of like the world ending and things collapsing into darkness. Kind of sick, though. That's where the Asriel being a photographer plot point comes from, I believe. Was Asriel? I think Asriel being a photographer actually goes back to like Undertale and how we'd try to film Kara on that camcorder. I think that's been a through line that got preserved from like 1 by 1 in the original Undertale trilogy of courier fics, and then like all the way, and it's been reinterpreted in Deltarune. It's what the Yeek wishes it was. That's awesome. I hope Courier, you should go leave that as a comment on the fic. This is what Yeek wishes it was. You missed that what's with the photo thing? It's a death flag in VNs? Oh, I don't think that's what it's going for. It's just that in Undertale, you have all those tape recordings of Asriel trying to film Kara, but he always leaves the lens cap on, which is the joke. So Courier just kind of ran with that, so that Asriel, if he was allowed to grow up and not die, he would become like an amateur photographer. Okay. Pete, get up. He stirred and opened his eyes to the woods sunken in twilight. The horizon, if the horizon were visible, then there would be only a sliver of sun now, stained rose pink, but there were only the trees, their silhouettes rendered ambiguous in the purple gloom. God, that was not the take, but oh well. Asriel's fur almost glowed in that murk. He was shaking Pizzapants' shoulder with some urgency.
Hey, Azzy,
he said, slurring a little with sleep.
Rest well?
I wasn't supposed to fall asleep. I told you to wake me up.
What? I thought you were being cute. You were cute.
He pushed himself off the tree trunk, flexing the stiffness out of his neck.
What's the big deal?
Never mind, it's fine, but we need to go now. Asriel paused, adding, I'm going to miss dinner. Pizzapants' first reaction was offense, followed by resignation. Of course, Asriel thought that dinner with his family was more important than spending time with him. This was just a fling, the two of them creeping around until he left town for better things, maybe referenced later in awkward conversation until they finally parted ways for good. But Asriel's coiled posture and the way his eyes were darting around made him think twice. There was something he wasn't telling him. Maybe there were more problems at the Dreamer household than he was letting on, but Pizzapants didn't ask. This was the unspoken compact of their relationship. He could grouse and grump and whine all he wanted, and in return, Asriel listened and commiserated and kept his own troubles to himself. That's kind of the, it's one half of the let that sink in dynamic. Because in LTSI, it was like neither Pizzapants nor Asriel liked to open up to each other, and that was the foundation of the relationship dynamic, was like just like total comfortable non-communication, which then goes disastrously wrong when they actually need to communicate something finally, but this is like a one-sided version of that, I guess.
Okay, alright, I'm up.
He rose, wiping the soil off his pants.
Let's hustle.
It's this way. They left at a fast walk. Fast for Asriel, which meant Pizzapants had to move at a light jog to keep up. The shadows deepened beneath the tree's canopy, enough so that he had to watch not to trip under any concealed roots. It was stressing him out, and after several minutes of this, he compulsively reached for his pocket to grab only empty space.
Oh, crap,
he muttered. Asriel looked back. What is it?
I forgot my lighter. Give me a sec, I'm gonna go back.
He turned around all the way. You can't be serious.
Azzy, seriously, what are you worried about? We couldn't get lost in this place if we tried.
He waved his phone at Asriel.
Here, I've got an idea. Just turn on your flashlight and point it back the way we came, alright? If I don't find the thing in 5 minutes, I'll turn around and head right for you.
He glanced at the phone screen. It was just a little past 7.
We should make it back in time for you to grab leftovers at least.
He was being difficult, he knew. Part of him really did want to go back for the lighter. It was the only one he owned, and he didn't have any matches at home. And after a day like this, the thought of going all the way back, all the way to the next day without a smoke was giving him a twitch. But on a deeper level, he hoped that maybe Asriel's frustration would boil over, and he would tell him why his posture was suddenly tense as a spring coil, and why he was hissing his words like he was afraid someone might be listening in. But Asriel just shook his head and got out his phone. "All right," he said. 5 minutes. I'll shout when time is up."
"Gotcha. Watch me go."
"Careful not to trip." Pizza Pants putting his foot down. Miscommunication can be a fun trope. Yes, I've read Let That Sink In. LTSI is like a miscommunication the fic. It is like a spectacular fireworks display of just people being shit at communicating. And it's impossible to describe if you haven't read it just how fascinatingly in-depth it gets with that premise. That's not even supposed to be the premise, but it's absolutely what it turns into. Pidge can't handle the praise, yeah. It's not even like the misunderstanding trope where like someone walks in on a situation and obviously misinterprets it. It's like Asriel and Pizza Pants locked in a room together. All they have to do is talk, and they still can't fucking manage to do it. They're just like completely talking over each other's heads, and neither of them gets it, and it's just like chaos. It's beautiful. It made me think honestly about like what communication is like in life and stuff. I'm not even kidding. It made me like consider like how much of relationships is people just like trying to say what they really mean and failing or sort of half knowingly failing because they don't really want the other person to know. And it's like it's very interesting. I'm gonna get stuck waxing poetic, and I should keep reading before I do that. LTSI is life-changing, yeah. Okay, he's not gonna trip. It took less than a minute of slogging through the bramble before he turned his own phone's flashlight on. The half-light here, Dark Souls 3 reference, was almost worse than full dark. Deltarune reference, It fuzzed the edges of everything, played tricks on his vision. The phone's hard white light solidified the ground again, and he glanced back to where Asriel's own light, glinting between the trees like an ersatz star. His footsteps rustled and crunch. The birds from earlier were being overtaken by the chitter of crickets, equally unseen, as if the sounds were produced by no true source, but merely an echo on loop. Pacific Drive reference. Sorry. He continued on, frequently checking behind him to make sure he was heading in a straight line. But the trunk they'd slept against didn't manifest, and the dusk was coming up fast, making the trees less distinguishable by the second. He sighed and raised his phone, panning the woods with the flashlight, and then both the light and the phone's screen blinked out. There hadn't been a low battery warning or anything. He jabbed the power button a few times with no response. The last vestiges of sun lay on the screen's black plane, reflecting his scowl.
"Fine, screw this. I can take the hit," he said, turning around. "Azzy, I'm coming back."
Asriel's light was gone too. Uh-oh. He stayed there, staring out at the ranked and sentinel trees. That's a courier sentence. Don't ask me what I mean by that. The ranked and sentinel trees, limed in feverish halo, grasping into the outer dark. He leaned to the left, then the right, then stood on tiptoe as though the light would suddenly manifest from another angle.
"Azriel, you out there?"
No answer.
"Come on,
This isn't funny," he would have finished, but the words snagged in his throat. Because Asriel wasn't above the occasional wisecrack, but he never pulled pranks. Not when his sibling had been a prankster enough for the whole town and then some. And besides, a silence had descended thick as wool batting. In that silence, in that silence could be heard not the least movement or footfall. After another few seconds, he turned the way he'd come, heeding Asriel's earlier warning to watch his step. He walked and eventually got his phone back out and mashed the power button with a certain desperation, to no avail. He then reached out to one tree and grinded his palm over the bark. The ache of the wood digging into his skin felt real enough, and all around the shadows rose and leapt as dusk gave way to full night. At work, he'd practiced himself at cultivating a certain numbness, keeping his thoughts at a remove from the inane. Oh, Elden Ring reference, at a great remove, Ronnie says that. Maddening, at a remove from the inane, maddening grind that occupied most of his day. The skill now rose up again, as he picked his way through the darkening woods. I love this take on Pizza Pants, like his jaded customer service mindset is actually coming in clutch to keep him calm in like a horror scenario. That's like a good, it's like in Darkest Dungeon when the character gets afflicted with, like trauma, but then like the positive aspects shine through and they become like extra brave or something instead of cowering. He's got hidden depth, Pizza Pants. Azzy X Pants X Rani. I mean, after the Tarnish hooked up with Blythe and ditched her, I guess she's single still. He can't go to hell. He's all edification days. Where was I? That skill rose up now again as he picked his way through the darkening woods.
Anyone out there?
He called, and was answered with only his echo. He decided he would not try to call out like that again. He'd never noticed it before, but how quickly the world crossed from the meridian from day to night. In the summer, it took seemingly forever for it to reach that threshold, the sky's bleeding colors from hue to hue, but once the sun set, darkness swept across the land like a blade. It wasn't long before he was making his way primarily by touch, hands groping around like a sleepwalker's. And while time was escaping him, he was sure by now that the town's lights should have been glimpsed in the distance, or the streaks of light from highway cars, their guttural engines, the din of civilization. Instead, there was only the indifferent trees and the spaces between them. Oh, Mori reference! Sorry. But then, in one such space, his straining eyes caught something glinting in the leaves. He reached down and his fingers curled around hard plastic, his cigarette lighter. It's not as stupid as it seems. Most of these are actual things that Courier's written about in the past. It was a cheap thing, sold by the box load. Conceivable that someone could have dropped a similar one here at some point, but he'd held it enough to recognize its nicks and contours, and when he flicked it, the flame popped up easily. He glanced around, breath starting to whistle. In all his walking, he didn't think he'd gotten turned around at any point. This wasn't the time to smoke, but he kept the flame up anyway, waving it in front of him for some feeble illumination. But something was wrong here, too. The shadows pressed up against the lighter's glow, smothering it. He held the flame right against a tree trunk, and the shadows still lay over its surface, thick as paint. So he snapped the flame off, and his vision swam as it struggled to readjust to the dark. When it did, he glimpsed something out of the corner of his eye that he hadn't noticed before. A gaunt figure huddled against one of the trunks, the green-yellow of its clothes blending into the same gangrenous shade.
Chris!
Hard to mistake them for anyone else. They sat with their knees pulled up and their head bowed, that tangled mop of hair veiling their face. They didn't react to his voice, and he knelt beside them, close enough to hear their breath. From the way it shuddered, they were either shivering or crying, those dry, noiseless sobs that could go on forever.
Chris, what the hell? You didn't come out looking for us, did you?
For a moment, all his dread earlier was erased by fear of what would happen if they didn't make it back to town. Toriel's reaction would be apocalyptic. But they still wouldn't raise their head, and now he saw how filthy their clothes were, their fish belly pale skin glinting through the rips in the fabric. how their hair was clotted in rat tails by the dirt, leaf fragments suspended in its tangles like dismal jewelry.
How long have you been out here?
He asked. But then he heard footsteps. A ways off, their pace uncertain, but unmistakable in this quiet. He could make out the crackle of every crushed leaf. He sighed in relief and turned toward that sound.
Finally. Hang on tight, Chris. I think that's your brother coming.
He raised his voice.
Azzy, I'm over here. Move your butt.
No one answered him. There was only the footsteps growing louder.
Azzy, say something.
Still no response.
Asriel?
Branches snapped and undergrowth rustled. The footfall's tempo had become regular, more confident. Slowly, he rose and maneuvered himself between Chris and the noise, staring wide-eyed into the darkness. He couldn't make out anything past this little clearing, but his newest visitor was approaching fast.
Chris, we gotta go, right now.
He glanced back.
Are you hurt anywhere? I can...
Chris was not there. He turned fully and couldn't even make out an indentation in the leaves where they had been. After a moment of studying the bare earth, he realized the footsteps had stopped, the footsteps which were now behind him. He did not breathe or blink. He stared at the contours of the tree trunk as if hoping the bark would somehow reflect whatever loomed over him now, burying him in its empty regard. Soon it became clear that it was waiting for him to make the first move. With a hesitant jerking motion, like a malfunctioning toy, he turned back around. Nothing there. His knees gave out, and he collapsed where Chris had been, covering his face as if to replace this awful darkness with one more mundane. The quiet returned and enfolded him, and there was no telling how long he might have remained there. But the minutes passed, and there came a new sound that made him raise his head. A distant voice, faint enough to be reduced to wordless staccato noise, but he could still recognize the owner. It was Asriels, but also not, because like everyone, he had known Asriel through childhood, and what he heard now had the rhythms and patterns of his speech, and especially his laugh, but the timbre was much too high. Asriel, as heard backwards through the corridor of years. And then the voice was joined by another, equally vague but equally unforgettable. There was a throatiness to it, like its owner had just inhaled a lungful of smoke, and the shock made him speak the owner's name aloud. Des? He clambered to his feet. That faraway conversation went on. He oriented himself in its general direction and started to walk. Dimly, he understood that none of this would be happening if he hadn't become so close to Asriel. There had been times in the past months where he'd felt like the relationship wasn't a relief from the monotony of his life, but an aberration from it. That this happiness had been somehow unsanctioned, with a price bound to come due. He'd pushed it away, or at worst accepted that Asriel's inevitable departure would balance the books just fine, but now he had the feeling that he'd stumbled off some crucial path, and into territory that was more aberrant by far. The swarms of gnats and midges that should have been present this time of year were nowhere to be found. He heard nothing except for that displaced chatter, but thought that sometimes there were only footsteps mirroring his own, and at one point a tree branch broke with a gunshot suddenness that almost made him jump out of his skin. The sky overhead was black as a cavern ceiling, with neither stars nor moon, yet the darkness was not deep enough to blind him, or rather, it was not uniformly deep, forming instead a spectrum of dark from ash to charcoal to vanta black that wavered and writhed in anemone frenzy. He felt shadows dripping down his back. He watched from every direction. He felt watched from every direction. Ooh, that was a doozy paragraph. Anemone frenzy. It's another courier sentence. Remember, kids, always be limed in feverish halo. By dating Asriel, he became a lore relevant. That's literally what it is saying. Yes. Also kind of let that sink in, Core, isn't it? It was, I guess I'm thinking of how Asriel didn't want Pizzas Birth to get a job as a shopkeeper because that would make him, like, immune to plot progression or something in the meta-narrative. Yeah, it's fascinating. Like, people were talking a lot about what this fic was about when it came out on the Azzypants thread, and there was a very stark divide between people who are familiar with, like, the Gaster lore and those who weren't, mostly Pidge. And there's, like, if you remove the Gaster explanation from all of this, it becomes, like, much more ambiguous, and you have to you know, you can read a lot more things into what it's getting at. Oops. Ooh, the one-shot music started. I think this is a bit more tonally appropriate for the fic, honestly. Or honestly, the Echoes of the Eye might be best for this. Hang on. Let's do this one. The voices at last faded, and his heart sank, because his surroundings hadn't changed at all in all that time. Sorry. The surroundings hadn't changed at all in all the time he'd followed them, but he kept going anyway, because there was nothing else to do, and soon the trees became sparser, the woods opening up. He moved faster, broke it into a run, and then skidded to a halt. There was a clearing ahead, but no exit. In front of him, rising from the earth like a shapeless black mass, was the bunker. No one in hometown knew about it. Rather, no one remembered it. There was something about it that stubbornly refused to stick in the mind, even though visiting it was a rite of passage for every child, and a frequent dare for anyone older. When asked about it, the adults would say it had been around for a long time, but none would offer specifics, not even the Boom family. Then they would change the subject, and the kids who questioned them wouldn't realize the subject had been changed until later, and over time the bunker would once again sink back into the comforting anonymity until dredged up by the next generation. Its door was covered by ageless bramble, and the structure itself by grass so thick it was like the earth itself had tried to swallow it, only to choke halfway. He couldn't think of anything he wanted to see less at this time. It was enough to make him look over his shoulder, back the way he came. The figure in the woods was perhaps 24 paces back, little more than an impression of a deeper dark. Its face was covered in shadow, its shoulders slumped, and it stood still and silent with its hands at its sides or maybe in its pockets. But he could see how similar its build and height were to his own in the dim ember of the cigarette at the corner of its mouth. Numbly, he turned back and walked into the clearing. I love how that's conveyed. David Lynch is just like budging into the stream chat now. He'd emerged at the side of the bunker and circumnavigated it slowly, as if the structure might bite. The path that led from its rear into town was consumed by still more trees, but otherwise the clearing was the same, if leached of color by this unnatural dark. Then he rounded the corner to its entrance, and Asriel was there, the Asriel who greeted him earlier today, staring at his double doors with the mesmeric intensity. Neither of them moved for a time, until Asriel twitched and turned his head. "Pete?" he whispered. "Is that you?"
"I think so,"
he replied.
"Is that you?"
Asriel stumbled toward him, and he resisted the urge to back off, because he had a shell-shocked Paul that was every bit as unnerving as anything else he'd seen tonight. But he stayed put as Asriel reached out and gingerly touched his face, and let out a shocked wheeze when he grabbed him and pulled him in, squeezing tight enough to compress his spine. "You're real," he said, claws digging in. "Finally something real."
"As I can't breathe."
Sorry. He released him and stepped back. "Did you see anything out there?"
"I'm not sure."
Forcing down the memories of those spectral visions.
Did you?"
I don't know what I saw." He paced away, clutching at himself like he'd suffered a chill. This place was never right after dark, but we should have had time. I wasn't supposed to. He whirled back, fangs bared. "You should have woken me up."
"Wait, you knew this would happen?"
"I didn't have to. I could tell anyway. The way Chris stares sometimes out there, looking at..." He gestured wildly at the encroaching shadows. "But I couldn't ask them what they saw. I didn't know what to ask. I don't know how to talk to anyone anymore. They almost know something's going on. How could they not tell?" He was pacing madly, closer to the bunker door. "But all of us keep acting like everything's the same and nobody's fooling anybody. They don't listen. We don't see. Nothing's getting better. There's always more. I don't know how to say to them." He grasped his ears and pulled hard. "I hate it here. I hate this town." Those last words came out with a serrated edge, loudly enough to echo. He watched Asriel stand there, gasping, felt his own chest tighten like a clenched fist. This fic is like good. Yeah.
I guess that's something we have in common,
he said weakly. Asriel cackled, high and jagged like he was coughing up broken glass, and then turned and slammed his fist against the bunker doors. The hollow boom made him flinch, and when Asriel spoke again, his voice was toneless and hoarse. "This is all my fault," he said. "I shouldn't have brought us here." He remained like that, head bowed in front of the door like a child in time out. Pizza Pants approached him, cautiously, and laid a hand on his shoulder. When Asriel turned to face him, his eyes gleamed wet.
"I don't care what you say, Az. You had no idea this was going to happen, and I wouldn't have believed you if you'd told me. Not even if you'd found a way to say without sounding completely nuts."
Asriel sniffed and wiped his face with his forearm. "Why were you so calm?"
"You know why? You want to know why?"
He took Asriel's hands in his own, looked him in the eye, and spoke with great sincerity.
"Because my life's been this way too stupid to end in the middle of a haunted forest."
That got a giggle out of him, much too shrill, but still a far cry from the unhinged laughter he'd spit up a few minutes ago. Pizza Pants smiled too, despite himself.
Here's the thing,
he went on, and pointed northward.
"We know that it's straight back. It's a straight shot back to town in that direction. Let's start going that way. Even if you don't get anywhere or loop back to this place or something, we can both freak out together. Not until then, okay?"
"Okay, sounds good." He walked off, hand over his chest. "Just let me catch my breath." Need a sip of tea? Yeah, it's interesting how both the Azzy and the Pants have their turn to kind of take charge in this, because Asriel starts off as the confident one in, you know, day-to-day circumstance, and then when shit hits the fan, Asriel's the fucked up one and Pizza Pants takes over. It's very wholesome. It's lovely, really. Yeah, the bingo card. We should do the bingo card before I forget. Reference humor? None but my own. Okay, there was a human. Chris appeared. Bodily fluids. Non-English word? That's a tough one to describe. I don't recall anything like that. Oh, I sipped. This is a free space. Come on. Perversion? Does Asriel being into Pizza Pants' cigarette breath count as perversion? I think that might. Character gets renamed? Oh yeah, we got the Pizza Pants name. There was no crush in this one, interestingly. We skipped straight to the relationship part. No manipulation. No death. No color coding. There is smoking. There is some kissing. I didn't see any spelling errors. Outfit description, I guess we got the purple flannel. I wasn't really holding out too much hope to get a bingo on a courier fic. The dragon breath, I think that might count. Actually, okay, if we... this doesn't have any footnotes, but if it did, we'd have a bingo here, and probably. I think this is going to be a pretty easy row right there. A flashback? Oh, yeah, we guess we had like a diegetic flashback to the past, like a spooky ghost flashback. That counts. Toriel was not implied to be homophobic. Okay. He stayed by the bunker door, keeping Asriel in his line of sight. He was afraid to blink. Whatever rules the world now operated under were unknown to him. Even if they stood side by side, they could be separated again at any moment. Then something else caught his attention, behind him once again, at the very edge of his hearing. He wanted to dismiss it as a hallucination, but Asriel turned around at it too.
"Do you hear something?"
I was really hoping I didn't.
"It sounds like, scratching."
Behind the bunker door, arrhythmic and gossamer faint. He knelt down in spite of Asriel's warning, and put his ear against the pitted steel. There wasn't any urgency behind the scratching, he thought, not the desperation of some prisoner clawing for escape, but curiosity, like an animal asking to be let outside or in. As he listened, it sounded less like scratching at all and more like whispers. The same kind of conversation that had led him to the clearing in the first place. The rise and fall of speech, but without the words, and in no voice that he could recognize. Then the metal screeched with such piercing suddenness that he cried out and fell back, hands over his ears. It felt like his teeth had been rattled in his gums. A great grinding as a deadbolt clogged with eons of rust being ripped back. It sounded again and again, the entrance trembling with each impact and shedding bramble like rust, and rust like flurries of dander. And then the bunker doors cracked open. He only had the least glimpse of the other side before Asriel hauled him up and pulled him out of the way. A hair-thin slit of darkness that made all the other shadows in this netherland pale in comparison, and hung in front of his eyes like a negative photo flash as Asriel pulled him through the woods, and he didn't dare look back because the sound was bad enough. Sound that was not sound at all, but a consuming pressure like a vice grip on his skull, roaring anti-tinnitus that grew louder and drew nearer, but at the core of that noise he thought he heard something else, a separate vibration, thin and pained and dreadfully alive. To his horror, Asriel looked over his shoulder. "Chris, is that—"
"Chris isn't there, you idiot,"
he shouted.
"Just run."
For a moment he thought Asriel would turn around and doom them both, but he picked up speed instead, bringing to bear every ounce of his track-running skills. His lungs were on fire, but Asriel loped through the bracken and pulled them both along, and then the darkness ahead parted like a curtain and revealed the street lamps and shining windows of Hometown. In those last few seconds, he was able to match Asriel's pace, the two of them gliding across the earth and then the asphalt, as they passed the cemetery and the church and the town hall, all these mundane and blessed landmarks, and skidded to a halt beneath the street lamp's glow, the two of them near collapse with exertion and relief. Yeah, Orpheus and Eurydice, too true. I don't know how well it's coming across in this context, but like I read this on my own at night, and like this was genuinely spooking me. The pivot to horror is like so sudden here when like the fucking just the door cracks open and he gets to see it for like a split second, then he gets wrenched away. It's like, what the fuck was in there? Just how ambiguous it is gets to me. It's just like you see into the abyss for a split second. You don't even have a chance to look at what's going to come out before you're running away. Like, it's so good. That's just such a frightening image. It's like a door that's supposed to be closed, just opening into blackness out of nowhere, and just, oh shit, like, you don't want to be there. Yeah, Asriel being good at running is, that's actually part of, kind of canon. Like, he has that, the track t-shirt in his drawer in some save files. What does sentence say? In some save files, he has a cross-country shirt. He literally peeped the horror. It reminds you of Winter's Gate? I don't know what that is, actually. Is it gone? Asriel panted. He looked back and saw only the familiar roads and the woods, the path to the bunker wide open as ever.
"Yeah," he said. "Whatever it was, it's gone."
Asriel let out something between a laugh and a sob, and then rustled out his phone. His shaking hands fumbled it, and it clattered to the pavement. And before he bent to pick it back up, Pizzapants noticed the screen had come on again. He checked his own phone. It was around 9:30. It had felt like years. "Gotta call Chris," Asriel muttered. "Make sure they're okay. They have to be okay."
Whoa, hold on a second.
"Just look at all these texts. Mom's gonna kill me."
Stop.
He knelt down in front of Asriel and blocked the phone screen with his palm.
"What do you think they'll do if they hear you cracking up like this? Deep breaths first, yeah?"
They tried to demonstrate. Or he tried to demonstrate and only produced a hacking cough.
God, these freaking cigarettes.
"Okay, you're right. Thanks, Pete." He pulled himself up by the lamppost and leaned against it, breathing deep. "Could you hang around until I'm done?"
You couldn't get me out of the spot if you hit me with a truck. I'm not going anywhere."
Knowing someone named Pete must be interesting, because you could say, like, do it for Pete's sake, unironically. Just had that thought. Asriel smiled gratefully, but Pizzapants couldn't quite return the gesture. He thought of that filthy and forlorn shade in the woods, to say nothing of whatever Asriel had heard when the bunker opened. He was white-knuckle as Asriel put the phone to his ear, listening to it ring once, twice. "Howdy, Chris," Asriel said. "Did I wake you up?" Pizza Pants remembered to breathe. He only caught half the conversation, Chris's voice faint enough from where he stood to be reduced to noise. "Yeah, I know. I was hanging out with Pete and lost track of time. Mom must be... I figured. Not sure I want to read those texts." He started nervously scratching his forearm. "Think you could run interference for me one last time, just so I don't get grounded until Christmas? Whatever it takes, just as long as you don't cause any permanent damage. The bath bombs, you still have those? Where do you even... Actually, never mind. I don't want to know. Hopefully it won't crack the toilet this time." He looked at Pizza Pants apologetically. "What? Who was I?" "Pete, like I said. I told you." He sighed. "Yes, I mean Pizza Pants. Yes, that... Chris, he's the only one in town, and you know it." Now his expression gained a hint of panic. "What were we... just, doing normal stuff. Being normal together." Pizza Pants gestured at him incredulously. Then Asriel smiled in return. Fucking golden mental image there. "What the fuck, Azzy?" "What's so funny?" he said. Okay, don't rub it in. Just wait 5 minutes before you get to work. See you soon, Chris." Being normal together. He's insane. Pete means blowjob in Argentina? What? A Pete? Like, how does that even get used in a sentence? Getting some Pete at the frat party, like, what? But is it like pete or something? I'm assuming it's pronounced different. Oh, it is pronounced different. Okay. Kid named Pete. Yeah. It's funny. His name isn't Pete, and not even his nickname is Pete. His nickname is Pete. Pete is the name, his nickname isn't. He hung up the phone, relaxing by inches. The two of them were alone out here, as ever. Hometown went to sleep early, and already some houses' windows were going dark. They stood there in the lamplight's Isle of Night. "That went better than I thought," Asriel said. "It's been forever since I heard them laugh like that."
"Glad someone thinks it's funny. Your mother's gonna bury me alive."
"Don't worry about it. Chris is really good at getting her attention. Maybe she'll even let me into the house again before the semester starts." He put his phone back in his pocket, but neither of them said their goodbyes. Asriel cast an uneasy look back the way they'd come. The path gaped like a mouth. "I know it wasn't actually them back there," he said. "Well, it was and it wasn't." Pizza Pants said nothing. "We went out there when we were younger. The four of us, me, Chris, Des, and Noelle. We were messing around in the woods, but Chris wanted to see the bunker. I think they were doing it to scare Noelle, or maybe to show her there wasn't anything to be scared of. It wasn't always so easy to tell with them." He shook his head. "But when we got there, they had some kind of seizure. Fell to the ground, moaning. I'd almost forgotten about it, but the noise we heard back there, it reminded me of how they sounded." He hissed air between his teeth.
"This kid can't catch a break, can they?"
They shook it off after a little while, but Noelle was in hysterics. Des was furious too. I'm pretty sure she thought they did it on purpose. Ho-ho jazz? Okay. Gonna put the kibosh on that. We're going back to one shot. Chat member, heterosexual ratings, negative. Thanks for that. I'm pretty sure she thought they did it on purpose. That might have been the last time we all hung out together. Somehow it slipped my mind until tonight. How do you forget something like that? He looked back to Pizza Pants, all the levity gone from his face once more. He looked exhausted. I don't really hate hometown, you know, but this place has been going bad for a long time. Am I really supposed to leave you all here to deal with it? A silence between them. A mundane silence, not the smothering absence they'd both endured. Power lines hummed and crickets chirped their incessant tempo. Pizza Pants took out his cigarettes and the lighter that had brought them so much trouble. The flame leapt, caught.
I think some of us are tougher than you give us credit for.
He blew smoke, stirring back the way they'd come. He was pulling out his badass face for this one. Can't go to hell, mollification days, little buddy.
This was only like 3 times as bad as my average workday. 4 times tops.
You don't have to act tough for me.
Why not? I want to be an actor,
He said dryly.
I'll be alright, Az. Chris might have trouble adjusting for a little while, but it sounds like they've made it through a lot worse.
He shrugged.
Hell, I'll look after them if they want to hang around me. At least I can make sure they watch where they step after the sun goes down.
He had been holding the cigarette between thumb and forefinger, and was about to take another drag, but before he could, Asriel plucked it out of his grip with his other hand and gently turned to his face so they were eye to eye. Asriel was kissing him before he quite registered what was going on, and the two of them had become more experienced since their first time on the lake path. The hard curves of his fangs rolled and scraped across him as the kiss went on. He smelled like laundry detergent and soft earth. Finally it broke off, Asriel's hand still on the back of his neck. The fucking teeth, dude. Always the teeth. Go for it, Azzy. Go for it. You're really amazing, Ren. The Ren name comes out now. That's so suave. You delicately replace the cigarette. Don't forget that before I come back, alright?
Sure, okay,
he squeaked. Asriel waved and then walked off in the direction of home. By the time he reached the end of the block, he'd become chiaroscuro, the night swallowing the purple of his shirt and leaving only his ivory fur, suspended in the black until that too was gone. Chiaroscuro, also a courier word, but I know this because as some sort of book report in school, we had to read The Tale of Despero, which had an extensive segment devoted to explaining the meaning of this word, which really stuck in my brain apparently. It means black and white. It's not humorous, chat. It's not humorous. There may have been a silhouette reference. Getting some more tea. Non-English word. I think that counts. That's a loan word. Maybe that counts. I'm not totally sure what the boundaries are, because most of English words are not English. Pete is the one with the Riz. Maybe they both have Riz in turns. Maybe that's just they can both do it. Yeah, it's Italian, I think. Okay, where was I? Right, there it was. He stayed there for perhaps another full minute before his fingers started to sting. He then remembered the cigarette in his hand and hastily dropped it and ground it out. His mind was still fizzing, wide awake, but the rest of him was one big ache. When he crawled into bed, body and brain would be stiff in competition to decide whether he got any sleep that night. Then that's a big mood. For a while longer, he leaned against the lamppost, still hesitant to leave its protective circle of light. Every shadow had gained a menacing new dimension. He'd cast one look toward the woods, half expecting to see himself staring back. This morning, he'd mashed his phone alarm into silence and staggered bleary-eyed and groaning to another day of food service, with nothing but further such days to come. Now there were all these fresh nightmares to contend with. Why had they escaped in a natural dark? Had it receded because of the bunker opening? Because they'd found the right path? Or out of sheer whim? What else was leaking out of this town's forgotten spaces, waiting for someone to step wrong or sleep too late? But he'd gotten a deeper understanding of Asriel Dreamer than anyone beside his own family, and with the possibility that maybe their relationship wouldn't be so temporary after all, Probably not a fair trade-off, but it wasn't nothing. The street lamp's bulb hummed overhead. He stood on the threshold between its glow and the darkness on the pavement, and took a step forward. Then another. That's a fun event. You might be weirdly accurate. It's not specific. What is the trade-off? It was the horrific nightmares being introduced compared to maybe Azzy's more into me than I thought. Or I didn't highlight the right sentences, but I think that's supposed to be the trade-off. It could have ended there, but no, we gotta not da 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 da. This is da 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 da. The Twilight Zone ending. Another day, mostly uneventful. Alfie's came in at noon and spent the next 45 minutes anxiously vibrating in a corner before ordering a single plain slice. Depressing as fuck, by the way. The Dragon family showed up too, with their customary choice of toppings, and the Warrior's bombastic method of applying them meant that half the pizzeria was now bedazzled with glitter. I'm headcanoning this is Joseph Anderson in between editing the Witcher video. It's basically Moncton, right? Hometown like Vermont. It could be Moncton. Pizzapants spent the rest of the day out of sight, trying to get the stuff off his clothes before clocking out, with Blueear's usually cheery good night at his back. That guy's enthusiasm was a nail file across his soul. No, that's not Susie's. That's the like the dragons at the QC's diner. Talk about hoarding treasure or something. I forget. It's always a bit awkward to refer to monsters you don't have a name for. Like, is it polite to refer to them by species? It's all you can really do sometimes. Monster Kid, I know. The little one won't eat anything unless it looks like treasure, right? Got that grind set. The door jingled shut behind him as he looked over to see Asriel there, leaning against the brickwork. He looked daisy fresh. "Howdy," he said. "Same pepperoni, different pizza."
Funny guy.
"I was headed toward the lake. You want to come? Decompress a little?"
"Sure. Maybe once we get there, you could hold my head under the water till the bubbles stop."
His smile turned sympathetic. That kind of day, huh?"
"The kind you get every day."
They walked side by side, joined only by the occasional passing car. Hometown was settling in for supper time. The day was partially cloudy, and the setting sun tinged everything with gold, and highlighted the numerous specks of glitter he hadn't been able to pick off. Their shadows stretched long on the ground beside them, Asriel straight-backed, his bent like an apostrophe. "Getting dark earlier," Asriel remarked.
"I'm sure is. Time flies."
"At least it's not as hot anymore. Must be tough at your job with that oven and everything."
"It sucks, but once it gets colder, the freaking mascot costume comes out. You can't win."
They passed Asgore's flower shop. The sign said open, but Asriel gave it a fretful glance and kept walking. The lake was empty when they arrived. The water was also glittering. Pizzapants' shoe crunched on the shoreline, and he got out his cigarettes.
"Packing up going okay?"
he asked, lighting up. "Still procrastinating, but I have to get it done sooner or later."
"Mostly sooner. Not much time left, right? This place isn't going to be the same without you."
He grinned around his cigarette.
"Maybe I'll finally have a shot with the ladies around here, eh?"
"That's the spirit. Keep the dream alive."
"Wise ass."
He picked up a flat stone, took aim, and it flicked out over the water. It skipped once, limply, and sank. He drew a disgruntled jet of smoke and then rubbed his eyes. They must have gotten pollen in them. For a second, the ripples across the water had wavered and duplicated across his vision. Then he looked back. Asriel had his phone up, his own beady glass eye glinting in the sun. Oh, its own beady glass eye. Asriel does not have a glass eye. It's the phone. Okay.
"Again, dude?"
Pizzapants asked. "Why not? The light's great this time of day." Asriel's shutterbug habit was the stuff of legend, or maybe infamy, because while he took pictures of everything, all the time, their quality was dubious at best. Occasionally he'd manage to capture a decent scene or subject with way too much extra detail and a slightly nauseating tilt on the frame. and at worst his photos looked like something one might find by looking into a kaleidoscope. None of it seemed to deter him any, and he snapped several shots at Pizza Pants as Pizza Pants stood there, half-consciously fixing his posture. "Got some really good ones of Chris at the spot a while ago," he said, lowering the phone. "They're hard to mess up, the lake framing everything."
If you say so. How are they doing anyway?
He shoved the phone in his pocket. "Fine, we're just, giving each other space."
Maybe they're getting used to not having you around, until the fall break at least.
"Sure, that's probably it." He started to pace the lake, looking at some vague direction toward the woods. "They're pretty independent these days. Just hoping they stay out of trouble, as much as they usually do."
Well, don't lose any sleep over it. Like I said, I'll look after him.
Asriel went still and turned to him.
When did you say
that?" He started to answer and stopped, mouth slightly agape, because the certainty was there without the history. He had been sure he'd made that promise to Asriel, but when and why escaped him. Asriel's puzzlement deepened to concern as he stayed there, mute, running it over in his head, and then shrugged and decided to push on through.
Guess I was just thinking about it a lot, he conceded. Either way, I said it now, so technically it counts. I can make sure they keep the hell away from food service.
Asriel grinned and lightly punched him on the arm. "You're all right, Pete. Try not to lose your mind before I get back." Pizza Pants blinked, rubbing his arm and getting a palmful of glitter. By the time he processed what Asriel had called him, he was already heading back up the path.
What did you just... Come on, Azzy, don't start with that. One nickname's bad enough.
Asriel spun on his heel and shot him a dual finger pistols and a wink before going on his way. Pizza Pants watched him go for a minute, feeling strangely wistful. Then let it go. It was impossible to stay irritated around hometown's golden boy, even for him. No work tomorrow. Ordinarily, he'd already be stressing about whatever corrosive insanity the next day would bring, and without that stress, his evening was somehow barren. In a few minutes, he would make his way home and idly browse through acting schools, wondering about what might be. He lingered as the setting sun kissed the tree line and the wood's shadows grew and leapt, slowly circumnavigating the lake, then stopped and turned to look at the woods, hands in his pockets, his cigarette a pinprick of light at the corner of his mouth. Far back between the trees, he thought he could see something, a figure in the darkness. It seemed familiar, but when he tried to focus, it was already gone. Honestly, kind of a chilling ending. That very upsetting, that really upset me. So there's a lot to unpack with that, clearly. There's a lot to unpack.